Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Suzan Kenawy, Marketing Manager at AUC Press. And our event today should be about an hour, and it's recorded, and it's going to be uploaded to our Facebook page and YouTube channel, AUC Press, afterwards. Our book talk today is about Zar, spirit possession, music, and healing rituals in Egypt. This first came out as hardback in 2016. And it sold out, and now it's available again in paperback. And you can get your copy at major bookstores and online book retailers like Amazon worldwide. And now, I have to say, today's talk is going to be very unique. It's going to be different from a lot of the events that we've had because of two reasons. The topic is very different. And also, our speaker is a very exciting academic who's gonna share the details about Zar. So I'm gonna leave the floor now to our book author, Hager El Hadidi, Associate Professor of Anthropology at California State University at Bakersfield. Hager, take it over.
Hi. So I really thought about how do we do this interesting, because talking for 45 minutes is really boring. So I thought I would divide it into 3 sections. And then we take questions every section. So I will begin with the story of origin, how it all came about, how does it look like in other cultures, and then move on to the life cycle and when does one become perhaps afflicted with a Zar spirit, and then we can take question and answer, and then I'll move into the musical bands and their composition and where they came from, and then we'll have an example of music, and if we still have time, we can go into a little bit of the material culture of Zar. Okay, so once upon a time, there was African slavery in the Middle East, particularly in Egypt. Around the 17th century, there was a very important regional international trade that included spices, coffee, and African slaves from Ethiopia, who were mostly from the Oromo groups or Gala. So, and this business was really concentrated in Upper Egypt around the areas of Qena, because that's where the business was and where the businessmen were, and they were also related to ports on the Red Sea. Many dignitary men, notable, were buying Ethiopian slaves to increase their households. They were incorporated into the women's world, and they actually became wives. So these Ethiopian Gala female slaves brought in some of their own culture, just in structure, because actually the oldest form of Zar that we hear about in the archives comes from the 16th century in Ethiopia. By the early 19th century, when Egypt became of interest to travelers, we start having documentation. But my work proves that it started first in Upper Egypt and then moved to Cairo and other places. Were there other spirit possession groups from other groups of slaveries and other cultures? Yes, because people were moving all the time from North Africa all the way to Mecca, and there was a lot of diffusion between the different forms that exist in North Africa. They're not called Zar. The word Zar only appears in the Red Sea region and the Gulf region, all the way to Persia. Whereas in North Africa, they have different names, but they have exactly the same structure. Also, with the Atlantic slave trade, we have very similar African forms that move into the New World. So we have voodoo, and we have Santeria, and we have, and they all share one structure. The structure has to do with an enlightened being and numeral beings, spirits, if you will. Sometimes they're minor gods, who merge with who hybridize with the prevalent religion. So in our Middle East, they syncretized or hybridized with Islam, whereas in the New World, they hybridize with Catholicism. Okay, so so now I want you to imagine with me. You're in Cairo. You're a teenager, boy or a girl, and you start experiencing body changes and becoming a man or a woman. We have to think about the context of these young kids who live in extended household and who suddenly, particularly girls, are not allowed to leave the house once they showing femininity on the body. Whereas before that, they were playing industries, they were going on errands all the time. So suddenly, some of these teenagers experience a shock or a trauma for becoming teenagers. Nobody talks about it. And they started having anxieties, or what we call anxieties, started having nightmares, starting getting scared in the dark, and so on. And some of these kids exhibit a change in the mood, and their mothers and aunts start noticing something is wrong with my child. She's having nightmares, she's screaming, her demeanor has changed. So they start thinking, I wonder what's wrong with them. One of the possibilities is to have to be possessed by Zar. What are Zars? Zars are jinn. And in Islam, God created the earth for both humans and jinn and gave them the earth to inhabit. So we can think about jinn and humans as counterparts of God's creation that inhabit the earth. They're different than angels or other beings that live in heaven. But jinn cannot be seen. And jinn can only be seen if they take possession of a human body. So Zar is one of these paths whereby people show their spirit possession on their bodies, whether within the cult itself or in everyday life. They change personality for a moment. So you're a teenager, you're in crisis, your parents take you, whether you're a young boy or a young girl, the women in your family take you to a Zar group. In neighborhoods or in urban centers, there used to be always a sheikh or a sheikha that had a weekly gathering with music, and they themselves could divine if the person is possessed or not. But one of the ways to identify if you really have a Zar is to go to a Zar musical weekly gathering 3 times. If the person responds with dancing or shaking or any emotional expression like crying, then this makes it possible for their social group to say, well, that child, that teenager has zar. Normally, or very rarely, would they do a zar ceremony for that teenager, particularly because they don't want to limit the chances of marriage for that child. It's not impossible. Many of the devotees that I met had done their zars very early, but usually they'd rather not. So they would do a ceremony that they call a sect in silence, without music, with sacrifice and offerings to the identifiable spirit that was identified through music. And then things are supposed to go well. Until when? Until that young teenagers become ready to get married. But for some odd reasons, they're handsome, they're well-to-do, they have money, but every time they attempt to get married, their marriage doesn't go through. So then a suspicion of zar possession comes about. That individual might not have ever exhibited change of moods when they're a teenager, but the fact that somebody's gorgeous and they're not getting married kind of makes people suspicious, and they start again going to the weekly gathering to check if there is zar. And why do they need to check? They need to check because the ceremony is a reconciliation between a person and their spirit familiar or their zar, because zar is conceptualized as a qareen or a human double. But also zar is never singular or plural. So you never have one spirit. You always have more than one. And anyway, even if you have one spirit, you always have their consort or their brothers and sisters. So it's always in groups. So once this happens and the young woman or young man get married, then everything is fine. And then maybe after marriage, they have another crisis. In an extended family, there is always a mother-in-law. And a lot of the social tension in Egypt in general is between the new groom or the new bride and their mother-in-law. Another crisis would be 2 years have passed and there was no pregnancy. So a suspicion of infertility for both men and women. So again, they go back to the zar sheikha or to their group that they identify or were introduced by their groups to check what's going on. And here they actually can do a public ceremony. But public ceremonies are very expensive. So only the well-to-do can do it. It might cost thousands of Egyptian pounds in the modern era. And it changes with time. It used to be like, say, 100 years ago, it used to be 7 nights of ceremony. Then it became 3. Then it became a night and a day. Then it became a night or a day. Then, and this I found in my group, is that if you cannot afford the zar ceremony, you would do your ritual with people that guide you at home in silence, and then you would go to the gathering, and that will be, it will not be that costly. You pay for each song and it goes, it goes. That's in Cairo, but in Alexandria, which is very interesting, only the rich pay the musician in the gathering, and people usually dance together. So are in other urban centers across the nation, actually, when it used to be very practiced. But in Cairo, particularly in the group I frequented, because they're actually the richest of all czars, they people like to do it one by one so that they get the full service. So now you're married, you've done one czar, you like it, it becomes a social grouping that you belong to this club of women and men who love to do czar. They love to dance into trance on a routine basis, and every now and then they would do a big czar ceremony in which they invite their friends and their neighbors. So some people love it so much that they do it every year, okay? And as they're doing it, they become, their sixth sense gets honed. By trancing over and over and over and over, these people become in control of their trance, and they change. With age and with different crises, they can keep on doing it. But then menopause or midlife crisis hits, and then you have a new pantheon and a new group that gets introduced. And this is really very secret. The music used to be played on pillowcases, and the ceremony would start from 2 o'clock to the sunrise. And this is the cult of the big lady, the grand lady, Sitt Kibira. Okay? There are connections between the pantheon of the czars that are symbolically defined as other. They're always other. So if you are from Cairo, you can be possessed by an Upper Egyptian spirit, or an Alexandrian spirit, or a Syrian spirit, or a Chinese spirit, or an Indian spirit, and so on. But if you're from Upper Egypt, you don't get an Upper Egyptian spirit. You get always those who are defined as others. Christian spirits work very well for the group. And there used to even be Jewish spirits that kind of disappeared with the 60s. It's mentioned in the literature, but I have never encountered it. It's kind of disappeared. When the Jews were no longer living in Egypt in the 70s, it just disappeared. And the 80s, it disappeared. There was even an anthropologist, actually, she's my teacher, Cynthia Nelson, that mentioned that a person had Moshe Dayan as their possessing spirit. So now we can take the first question and answer, and I would leave the microphone to Suzan Kenawy to kind of give us some of those questions.
So we've received a couple of questions before, but I encourage everyone to send more questions. I mean, Hager is ready to answer, so please do send anything you want to ask. The first question that we had is, how did you first become interested in the practices of czar? How did it start?
I didn't mean it at all, I have to say, right? I was very much interested in Egyptian material culture, and I started collecting czar amulets so that when I retire, I can work on the czar amulets at home. But then I was doing my master's at AUC, and I had prepared a project in full, and that was kind of very interesting to me. And then I couldn't do it because I had a child, and I couldn't go to Upper Egypt. So I decided that I have all these amulets. Maybe I'll do a proposal on these amulets, and it will. I had already done interviews with all the silversmiths, and the amulets were mostly from Upper Egypt. And so it won't take that much to kind of figure it out. Lo and behold, it took forever, because when I took the group of amulets to the different sheikhs of and kodias of Cairo, they could not identify them. Okay, it only took for me to, when I finally, after years and years of fieldwork, mastered the language of Zar and the symbolism of Zar and its structure, I could read actually each one of those amulets. And I wasn't able to attend more than 4 Zar sessions in Upper Egypt, okay? Only 4. And they were kind of at their last leg. And my interviews were with the silversmith that made these amulets, but they really didn't know enough. They didn't know what they were making. They knew that this was for Zar. They knew some names, but they didn't know which is which. Why? Because people who are possessed by Zar divine or pick up their amulets through dreams, or through coming to the silversmith or the goldsmith and kind of react emotionally to some of these items. So it's never the same. It's always from that, what we call in Western medicine, subconscious, subconscious reaction. Okay.
There's another question that says, is Zar still practiced today?
Okay. Because as I told you, there are 2 types of Zars. One that is musical and that is kind of semi-public, and one that is a sect or in silence. There's no way we can tell how many people are practicing the al-sect, because it's secret. You don't go around telling people. But I've met many, many, many women by chance, because I could identify not 100% accuracy, but maybe 85% accuracy, that a person has practiced Zar. Don't tell me how. I just can. You can see it on the body. So they practice in silence because the musical part of Zar is kind of dwindling. What do we have? We have very few groups, musical groups that are still practiced. Mm-hmm. In Cairo, more than other places. But there used to be in Cairo, in Port Said, in Ismailia, in the Delta, in Cairo and Abu Ghid, the village of Abu Ghid. And every markaz and every town in all the way to Upper Egypt. And from meeting other women, they always say, in the 80s, we used to go to Zar, and now we don't, because there isn't. But those who want to find it can find it. And now it's the Abu Ghid musicians that actually do the Zar, and they're still practicing, and they will be the one that survive. But as I will tell you in the next section about the different musical groups, the women who were in control of Zar in Upper Egypt and in Cairo didn't want their daughters to train. So the few that still live today and can do Zars are kind of have not trained their young ones. So I could even put, like, there was 100 when I started my field work, and now maybe there are 10, 20, 30 years later.
Hager, Kawakib Tawfiq wrote in the chat that the musicians of Abu Ghid are actually attending with her, and she's translating for them.
Okay, who's with her?
Worth mentioning. We have another question that's very interesting that says, do the Tsar have names? You mentioned the Grand Lady. Are there other characters?
Oh yeah, I mentioned the Grand Lady because that's the secret card. That's the one that we cannot photograph, we cannot tape. It's really very, and if you even go, when I used to go to my sheikha and say, I'd like to do this one, she says, no, about the shara, may God forbids, I hope you never have to, because it's a very hard path. It's about pain, blindness, and, you know, paralysis, and all sorts of, you know, body crisis. It's utter sickness, really. So there are, theoretically speaking, there are 66 spirits. And these are divided into families or clans or lineages. So there are Moroccan ones, there are Christian ones, there are Syrian ones, there are Indian ones, there are Gypsy ones, there are Upper Egyptian ones, there are Ethiopian ones, plenty of those. And they're in a hierarchy. Some are more important than others. So Mama is Sultan Azor, is the highest. Okay. And the songs always began for Mama. And Mama doesn't mean mother. Mama actually is the name that comes from Ethiopia. And all the Zars are called Wilad Mama, sons of Mama. Okay. So, and then you have particular characters with theatrical descriptions. And you can actually, many of those represent power from the 19th century or the 20th century. So you have Mama, Walad Mama, you have Yusei, you have Rumi Nagdi, you have the Moroccan, you have Abdussalam Al-Asmar and his sister Lalla. You have, you know, like but the Syrian and the Christians have names. The Syrians are just Shami. But interestingly enough, because spirit possession is so part of Egyptian, not Tsar, but Egyptian ethos or cosmology. So some people have a spirit whose name is Zaki, for instance. But Zaki, the one who has Zaki might go to Tsar and then she dances. Zaki turns out to be a Christian spirit, and then she dances to the Christian spirits. So the person themselves, have named their own spirit that is not necessarily from the pantheon of Tsar directly. But I don't know how old is this. This might have been recent, recent as in 50 years ago, as Tsar begins to become less and less practiced. Is there any other interesting question?
There are so many, but I feel like maybe we should continue the slides and go back, or whatever you want. We have, I think, minimum 15 questions.
Okay. Is there any question that doesn't pertain to music or the musical types or?
No, someone was asking, D. Noak is asking, are these ceremonies normally done by working class communities, or do they bridge all social classes?
They actually bridge all social classes.
Okay.
And there is a real misconception about talking about the working class in Egypt. Okay. Somehow the upper classes or upper middle classes projected what they think class means. I would rather say Shabi or traditional, because among the Shabis and traditional, there are people who drive Mercedeses and have jewelry worth millions of Egyptian pounds and have serious wealth, but they'd rather live in their own traditional neighborhoods. And that applies to both rural areas in the Delta or Upper Egypt or Cairo. Okay, so this issue of working class is like not exactly right. So I would say traditional, more traditional, less modernized, but also because it's also a family affair. So you might have grown up in Dar al-Ahmar, but you kind of moved to live in Garden City in your life, but you still have connection with your neighborhood.
Mm.
Why? It's not because it's about class, it's about connectivity. If you're still connected to your neighborhood, you know where to go. That said, that's one part. The other part is, as time goes by, Egyptians in general know less and less about their culture, and their culture they're informed by about their culture through television, not through actual practice. So people might think that this is something that their grandparents didn't do. But I actually went around asking my cousins, my family, everybody I know, right? The taxi drivers. So it turns out like my great aunt, my mother, paternal aunt, who was half Turkish, half Moroccan, and the daughter of a very important Sheikh Azhar and a very important Ottoman officer, used to have czars, and she would have been born in the end of the 19th century, but her czar doesn't look like anything I have seen, because mother described it. He had a caterer, they had invitation with Ayusha Hanem has the pleasure and the honor of inviting you to her garden czar. The jewelry were not gold, they were Ottoman Turkish jewelry for the czars, and women came in what do we call this, soiree and clothing okay. So it's really you have to have money to have czar. And as I explained, the poor or the working class do it at home and then go once to the hadra. But to have a party, a ceremony, a big ceremony, you need the money. So you would be from the rich peasants, 10 acres and plus, or a trader, or somebody who went to the Gulf and made tons of money, or a singer, or an actor, or an actress, or businesswomen, plenty of businesswomen.
So what do you think of the representation of czar in movies? Speaking of the idea that we got from the cinema.
Okay. I traced it. So it is the point of view of those middle and upper middle class about the other. I would say it is, first it started with European representation. So the Egyptian movies were kind of the infrastructure of the Egyptian movies were done by local European, by Greeks, Jews, and Armenians and Syrians who really weren't part of the culture and they didn't understand, and czar wasn't part of their practices. So they started representing it as within the aura of these people, or our past is superstitious, but we're modern, and we're not going to do this. We're going to be Europeanized completely, and you can see this in the 40s movies. After the revolution, the movies cut and paste. They reiterated what was in previous movies continuously. And they would actually, in all of those, they had real musicians in the movies. And they didn't really know how the film was going to show them. But during my time, it's a tough subject of discussion. We're not charlatans, they would say. And they are not, because they work so hard to use the music as a medium of healing. Okay, the only cinematographer or director that did not use Zar as a representation of backwardness, or there are two actually. So Yusuf Shaheen used it for dramatization of movement, for like a cinematic language, not judging anything. And Adil Imam had a movie called Al Ins Wal Jinn, which actually the people of Zar love it, because they say that's the truth. That's exactly what happens. Okay. So, yeah. Okay.
Okay. More questions? Zar ceremonies are mostly led by women, correct?
Well, that's a very confusing. Mostly when? Okay, so the knowledge of Zar is with women. So we call it in anthropology, it's a women's center. Now, today, when you don't have enough women musicians available and accessible, Abul Ghait are leading the band. They're leading. They don't necessarily know the right rituals. And it doesn't matter, because I don't believe in authenticity. Okay. They are masters of music, masters. Their music is fabulous. And the population loves them even more than the Upper Egyptian band, all women band, because they're good. They're very good. They're very good musicians. So good for them. How it's going to be in 20 years, I think it will be men who know, or men who know the songs. And women are not passing the knowledge to their children. Okay?
Yes.
Zar is not illegal. What is illegal is other thing. People think it is illegal, but it isn't illegal. There is no law against it. Okay.
Yeah.
If there are people who might be smoking pot or something during a ceremony, that's the illegal part. And that's when the friction between police and Zar performance. Also, it's about noise. If you have a relationship with the police station and you have a permission and you have good relationship with your neighbors, nobody's gonna say anything if you have a musical music until 4 o'clock in the morning. But your neighbors might complain, and so it's the noise ordinance. Okay, it is not Zar itself. But many Egyptians of the young generation are ashamed, because they've adopted the movie representation of what Zar was. And some people think it's satanic. Of course, it's not satanic, right? Or some people think it's it's scary. Zar ceremony is very joyful. It's extremely joyful. It's really about togetherness and joy. Can I move to the music?
Sure.
And then we can do the strange experience later if we have time. Okay, so. So this is a picture of Sheikh Anhar, the group the original Sheikh I worked with, and her brother Rauf. Sheikh Anhar was both a Sheikh and a Qudya. Not all Sheikhs of Zar are Qudyas. Qudya is the priestess or the officiant that deals with the grand lady, okay? The difficult path. Her daughter, Karima, was not a Qudya, okay? There is no Qudya available today in the Egyptian scene. Qudya is originally a Hausa word that means mount or horse. And in fact, the cult of the Grand Lady resembled West African forms of rituals and has nothing to do with the Ethiopian forms. And has been very much influenced by Hausa culture, which influenced all of the Algerian and Libyan and Tunisian different forms of spirit possession. Okay. So here we have Karima, the non-Qudya, but both Raisa means a lead singer, maestro, and a musician. She and a sheikha, she's a diviner. She divined with music, and she divined with reading the attar, which is you give the sheikha or sheikh for that matter a piece of clothing, most probably a headdress, and they take it for 3 days and sleep on it and have certain rituals in which they can maybe tell you what spirits are bothering you or what's going on with you, because it goes beyond Zar. This definition goes beyond Zar. The sheikha might say, well, no, you don't have Zar, but you have somebody who gave you the evil eye, or something else. Or, you know, you have to go to the Quranic, it's not Zor, it's something else. So there are 3 types of musical groups that are still available today, or bands, musical bands. They were much more than this in the past, but they kind of consolidated. So here we have the Karima's group of Saidi band, and they're either called Saidi band or Masri. It's Zar Masri or Zar Saidi. Okay. Later on, if we have time, I will share with you a song of the Zar Saidi for Rumi Nagdi. There's the Zar Tambura or Zar Sudani, and this is actually came after the occupation of Sudan by the Ottomans or the Egyptians through the Ottomans. And it's interesting because when you do the social history of Zar in the Sudan, you find that the Saidi form or the Masri form was introduced in the 1830s, 1840s by Egyptian sheikhs. And then kind of it mixed with the Sudanese types that were, some of them were indigenous, and then got diffused back to Egypt with the Sudanese community migrating back to Egypt, mostly to Cairo. And interestingly enough, in the 60s, that form was dominating because there was lots and lots of Sudanese bands that were migrating. And when you do the social history, many of the parents migrated from Sudan. And then you have Abul Ghait. Abul Ghait is a world of its own, and it's a mastery of music. And they did not originally start with Zar. They were Sufi musicians, and their music is very elaborate and it's actually from Cairo, although their saint is from Al-Ubayyan. And their story is described in a particular song dedicated to the saint Abul Ghait. They actually, like all musicians, sit together with different groups, and there used to be a lot of money in Zar. So they kind of incorporated it and included it. This was 4 generations ago. And it became part of what they do, but they don't only do Zar, they do a lot of saint songs, and they're actually very good. And you can actually, if you're in Cairo, you can watch them in Meccan sometimes. This is late Osman, who was the best Ghitani I've ever heard in my life. He wasn't even from a family of singers. He just, when he was little, he was so attracted by this music, and he was a virtuoso by what they would say. And here we have a group of Ghitani musicians. Some of them have already died, and I think whoever is with Kaukab has his father here. I'm not sure. So yeah.
She said she has Muhammad Abu Zayd and his brother Sabir.
So they're the children of Ibrahim. Is Ibrahim here? Can they see it?
I think so.
I think it's him here. I don't see very well, so I can't see if it is him or not. So okay. So now I want to talk about the song structure. All right. So we're going to use one example of one song. The song is very rare, has not been recorded, was forgotten when I started my field work. But one day I wanted to go to Upper Egypt, and my sheikha wanted me to stay. So she really decided to keep me by remembering this song. And when it was played for the first time, the musician said, "No, she's dead already," meaning we don't do it anymore. So I want you, we've edited it, because if we share it with you, it's 7 minutes. So we've edited it to 4 minutes to show you the structure that I want to talk about. So how does trance take place? How does it happen? It starts with, so every song is divided into 3 sections. Okay? It's up to the musician to make, since they have to sing both the song for the male and then the song for the sister, the female, they might decide to put all the third section that is called Tatira, that leads to trance, in the woman section. So this is the song for Rumi Nagdi. Rumi Nagdi has 2 names. Rumi means Ottoman. Najdi means from Najd or Hijaz. The song, or the spirit, became very popular during the time when Egypt was controlling the Hijaz. And the kind of representation he has in jewelry and in paraphernalia and clothing, because there used to be lots of clothing, was a short thread, and it was green with a crescent and a crescent and a moon, the Egyptian emblem. The earrings is a crescent and a moon. The amulets are a crescent and a moon. He's in Upper Egypt as well. And sometimes people don't remember his name, so they say Rumi Magdi. But anyway, so you will hear, so it's three sections. One that moves your emotion and calls the spirit to come, to appear. Okay? So they're calling, it's just calling, Ya Rumi Nagji, calling. And then the middle is a description of, or maybe flattering of the spirit. Oh, you're so handsome, or you do this, or you do that. So his personality. And then ending up with the Tachira. In the song we'll hear, the Tachira was short in the first song, but they moved to the sister right away and call the sister quickly because she's already there. Her brother is already there. She's already there. And then we move into the Tachira, which is extremely long because this is a tape recording. I taped it in a boombox. And I think this was a czar that I sponsored. So depending how long is a song, depending on how long does the woman take or the man take to kind of go into trance. Sometimes we make the musicians repeat the song because they didn't do it very well. But the good musicians, including the Abul Ghait, can read your body and know when you're ready, so they shift accordingly. The second or the third, they're reading. All right, can we hear the song?
Yes, sure. Be ready, and if you have the volume high, maybe you should lower it, and let's see.
No, it's yours. So I'm going to take some of the questions in the chat. Okay. So the one from Irene Basto, she's asking, is Zar considered a sacred dance practice? The word sacred is very difficult because what means sacred in intellectual Western tradition doesn't necessarily mean sacred. We don't have the word exactly. But is it taken very seriously? Yes. You apply the same pollution rules that you apply when you pray. You cannot come to Zar when you're not clean. I wouldn't call it sacred or non-sacred. I would call it, because I don't believe in that separation. I would call it that it necessitates purity of the body. Okay, that's one song. What is the reaction of Islamic scholars and leaders to the Tsar meetings? It depends. So let me tell you a very nice story. And it's not from Egypt. So there was the Mahdi of Sudan, who was a leader of a movement against the British and who ruled Sudan for a few years. And he made Tsar prohibited. But his second man in command, his mother, was very thick with Tsar, and she had to have a ceremony. So they had a ceremony for her. So the issue of prohibition and non-prohibition has to do with public and power. So, like anywhere in the world. Okay. So basically, they might argue, the Salafis specifically would argue against Tsar. Yet, some of them support the exorcism practice whereby women are beaten very badly, using the Quran, mind you, to exorcise them. And Coptic churches, some priests do exorcism with beating the women as well. So really, it depends. In public, people would say, yes, of course, the scholars. But not all scholars are from the anti-camp. Some scholars, their wives did Tsar. Their mothers did Tsar. So it really depends. General tendency, yes. One more question. Okay, Tsar jewelry. Can you get, this is from Maha Whitfield. Can you give us an idea? She's my friend. Can you give us an idea about Tsar jewelry? So, first of all, the first Tsar piece that one has to have is with the first ceremony, whether it is a sect, in silence, or in public. And this is a coin, a silver coin. Okay. A silver coin that might be independent, but it doesn't have to be. That silver coin seals the contract between the world of spirit and the human being when they start. But there are plenty of other pieces of jewelry. So, in each region in Egypt, whereby they used to have a tradition for silver and goldsmithing, had a different style. Okay. So, for example, I am wearing here an earring that used to be used for Tsar spirits in the 1920s. It's called Surat al-Aya. And why is it Tsar? Because it has the jingle. Every time you'll find a jingle, there is, it's about Tsar. Even when people have forgotten that this was a Tsar piece of jewelry. Then I want you to imagine the human body. And like Hinduism, there are spots in the body that ancient Kabbalic Islamic tradition identified. We don't have that connection, but it exists. So the forehead, the temple, the throat, the nose, then the heart, then the belly, then a longer space. Then you have the two sides. Then you have anklets and bracelets. and you have a bell. You also have sticks, and you have paraphernalia like for the bath. You have paraphernalia for the perfume. You have whiskey bottles, each for a spirit. So it's not only jewelry. And women used to have a box for this jewelry, and it used to be, as I said, Ottoman diamond, gold, silver, and nickel for the poorest of the poor, or not even. Jennifer, hi guys. Is there kind of like what we see here, like Haitian? Yes, it's very much the same with the same structure. But instead of like voodoo that mixed with Christianity, we have Zar that mixed with Egyptian Islam, mind you, which had a lot of Sufism in it.
There's someone was asking about Kulsum and Zar.
Actually, there is a song done by, which was invented by the late Anhar, in which she is riffing, she's kind of sampling from an Kulsum song. And it's called Ard al Hussein Pain. Ard al Hussein Pain. And vice versa is true. Some songs that was done by Said Makkawi kind of sampled Zar traditional music. Okay.
Also, speaking of music, someone asked if there's a specific song for a specific spirit.
There is a specific song for a specific spirit, unless you have your own personal spirit, so you get the generic with a name. I want to continue Mira's question. And so if you are drawn to particular rhythm, you are drawn to a particular Zar. Yes, exactly. That's why it's a divination. You go and you don't know what you're drawn to. Drawn to a particular tune. And this tune has a personality and has certain problems that they deal with. This spirit, you know, like for example, the Ethiopian spirit is about being excessively aggressive and nervous. So if you get nervous, okay. So there was this woman who beat her husband. So the excuse was that she was possessed by the Ethiopian spirit.
Interesting.
Interesting, right? Let me ask Ria Joseph's question. Hugs. She's saying hello and hugs from Ria. Giselle Habibi, are different types of song played?
Depending on the type of song.
Yes. Yes, and actually the good sheikh and the good maestro would know, because they keep an eye on the audience. And they know if you just move like this, they know that this. I think we came to the.
Yeah, we're running a little bit out of time. I understand you have other commitments afterwards.
Well, I can answer questions because Aaron is in my next class, and it turns out it was canceled.
Okay.
So Aaron is asking, does the person benefiting from the practice need to be aware and comply, or can it be done
on someone's behalf?
No, it cannot be done on someone's behalf. But you see, if your child, it's done to babies, it's done to pregnant women, to your baby when they're in their womb, and it's done to a baby after the subuh, after the 7 days. So your mother is doing it on your behalf. I mean, but you're there. You have to be there, because your body needs to, I mean, it needs to be used in the ceremony somehow. So. Okay, so I got this question. Can you review the origin of Zar? Okay. So my assumption and what I discovered through very intensive work is that there is not one culture that is not influenced by other culture. So Zar, according to the record, starts in Ethiopia in the 16th century. It could have been before that, but it wasn't documented before that. Something I didn't say earlier, the word Zar is a Hebrew word in other gods and other fires. So there might be a word that is common between Ethiopian language and Hebrew language that means other gods or other fires. Okay. I could not go beyond just knowing this because I don't know Hebrew. And because modern Hebrew is very different than ancient Hebrew. So, and the word Zar itself was never used because you cannot use it because it's kind of blasphemous, because it will bring it upon you. So with the Ethiopian slavery in the 17th century, when there was a booming regional trade, creating a class of people with surplus to buy slaves and to do Zars. But these slaves were from Ethiopia in particular, from the Oromo people in particular, because the Amharic people were controlling the slave trade. And this trade was spices, coffee, and Ethiopian slaves. And Ethiopian slaves in Egypt were females in particular, were not ever used for domestic purposes. They were used to expand households. So if a rich man can marry 4 women, he wants more children. So he has a consort slave. Once she's pregnant, she is free and the baby inherits and is part of the household. So these Ethiopian women, who actually many of Egyptians have Ethiopian ancestors, slaves. So I could tell from how they look and also from my own family stories. Okay. So they brought the structure to Egypt as Zar and some of the names of the big lineages. Meanwhile, there are other slavery coming from the other side, from West Africa, from Hausa land, from different places, maybe from Sudan as well. And they kind of enrich and gets built with details, with a different musical tradition that are very particular to Egypt. Okay. So there are Zars in Kuwait and in Ethiopia, in Persia, but they don't exactly have the same commonality. The only common thing is the definition of the other. Because it's other to human, but it is of human. It's like human, but other to human.
Okay. And there's a question that we received earlier about this. What's the strangest encounter or experience you've had in one of these Zars? If you want to.
So, all right. So what got me hooked really is that I trance very easily. You don't have to believe to trance. Some people trance, some people don't. In Egypt, people end up trancing, but also Europeans. So I have 2 incidents of very strange. So I'm young, it's in the book too. I'm young and I'm 19, I'm an anthropology student and I'm interested in cultural phenomena and I have a new car and me and my Belgian ethnologist friend, student of ethnology friend, were in the car, and then we hit Salah Salim, and we're hearing on Tuesday, and we're hearing this sound. It was a tent near Abu Saud. We go in, we sit. First time I ever see it in reality, and I never even paid attention to movies. I mean, Zaren movies. And suddenly, we're lured with music into this. The musician stood on my head and kept on doing the music, and they were Abul Ghait with a female lead. And lo and behold, both of us were dancing into trance, completely gone. And we weren't dancing any dances that are like any people that were, we didn't know how to dance. We just danced. And we trained. We weren't here for a while. So I was 19. Then field work, 40 years later, maybe 30. Or 25, I don't know, long time later. So I'm doing field work, I'm doing field work. Then I started realizing that if I don't do the ceremonies, I will never understand anything. And I started loving it really. And so I was doing my own ceremonies like everybody else, and singing with them, knowing all the songs, totally into it. So one of these, after a while, like my fourth initiation or something like this, by then I had totally mastered the trance, and I was kind of somewhere. So it's Mizar, they sang to me, most probably a Rumi Nagdi song, and I kind of tranced and was somewhere else. The room where we're in, which was actually, you saw in the pictures, is tiny. It's like 3 meters by 3.5 meters or 4 maybe. And we're kind of packed. Everybody's there. All my friends are there, like packed. And I just tranced and then sat down. And then another person was taken who was very advanced. She was so much into Zar that she went to Sudan for her Zars. It was completely in it. 20 years older than me. May she rest in peace. She started slapping everybody sitting, not me, but she started slapping. She was 1 meter away from me. I did not see anything. The only reason I knew about it is that they always say, hey, Greg, have you seen what happened? I didn't see it. Oh, she did this. And I'm like going, huh? I wasn't here. I was not here. Wow. And that was the first time. It wasn't the last time that this happened to me, but that was the first time. Maybe 2-3 more times in that day. So it's not like you trance and you lose consciousness completely all the time. Occasionally when it's very good, after you've learned how to hone it. Or if it took you by surprise, like it happened with us. Okay, you can take one more question. You choose it. I've done the chat.
Someone is asking, since we're coming to the end of the discussion, but if Zar is declining, so what's taking its place? How the needs are being met?
The needs are not being met because Zar is community and lore and togetherness and groups, let's say like clubs of women, like togetherness. It's become very, very hard on women. Very hard. Because imagine in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was so prevalent. Okay. And it's kind of aerobic as well. So every week you would go to your friends' grouping. So bodies were different. Now women are gaining weight, watching television. feeling bored, having no connectivity. People say go to the psychiatrist, but I don't think they do, and I don't think they're convinced, and it doesn't do the same thing. So it's unfortunate.
True.
So Trudy Bennett just asked something, and I just
She said this is terrific, and she has to go, unfortunately.
okay.
Mark Nabih asked if the ancient Egyptian language was incorporated somehow in the talismans or the spells used in the Zar rituals. No.
Not at all.
Okay.
We would not. So there's some other. You have to look at where it belongs.
Mm.
So it would be Coptic language. It would not be ancient Egyptian. No. And the reason why, because but the silversmith are and the goldsmith are all Coptic. There are no Muslims. Not because it's other, but because they were the craftsmen. They continue to do crafts. You call it talisman, I call it amulets. The amulets in Upper Egypt are all abstract, either mostly geometrical forms. The ones from Cairo and Alexandria are representational, so they represent the spirit itself, right? But there's one side in which you have the spiritual representation, and the other side you have either Ayat al-Kursi from the Quran, which is a protective amulet we used to wear all the time, or Ya Rabbi Satrak, God help me, some kind of prayer, short Islamic prayer. So that's what you have. You don't have, it didn't survive. The trancing, I'm sure, was existing in Upper Egypt. The music, perhaps, but if we can, and that needs an ethnomusicology. And it will not be whole, it will be parts and bits. You will have to compare some of the Coptic songs practiced in Upper Egypt with ancient Egypt and with some of the music in Zar. That's in another lifetime and not me. Thank you so much for being here, and
thank you, Hager, so much.
I hope I entertained you well.
Yeah, I see from the reactions that we're getting already, and also on Facebook, everyone's enjoying it. But I just want to confirm again, because many have asked, the recording is going to be available on our Facebook page, AUC Press, and also on YouTube channel tomorrow. And Hager has approved that maybe we could add a little bit of the song at the end so people could.
No, get the whole song.
Okay.
All the one song, Ruminati as a whole.
Okay, we're gonna add it to the video
all
on
of it,
YouTube, so you can hear it and have record of it.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Hager. And again, I want to say, if you want more information, you have the book. You can buy it worldwide through major bookstores and online book retailers. And we have a special 10% discount until the 20th of March through AUC bookstores if you're in Egypt, or indiepubs.com. So make sure to get your copy and read it. And Hager, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this definitely has been one of the most unique and different book talks that we've had. And I want to thank you for the time and effort that you put into it.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Have a lovely rest of the day or evening. Bye.